Israelis are finally going back to Europe, as research shows that Israelis are fleeing their settler colonial society in mass. Best news I've heard all year. Isn't it interesting that Israelis claim to have a deep spiritual connection to the land, but they can leave it so easily? Compare this to Palestinians who refuse to be relocated because they are willing to fight for the land that they love. Meanwhile, when Israelis feel a little bit of discomfort, they immediately run their ass back to Europe. One of the things that the corporate media refuses to talk about is the heavy price that Israel paid for committing their genocide. Israel's economy is in shambles, as the number one industry of tourism is now dead, and we have an entire generation of settlers that are now fleeing the state of Israel. Over 60,000 businesses closed in Israel in 2024 alone, as the global population rejects doing business with a country full of child killers. Big shout out to the Houthis in Yemen, who played a big part of this because of their blockade of Zionist supporting ships in the Red Sea. Israel falling apart like this, and settlers leaving their colonial project that they pretended was their holy land because of the acts of the resistance like Hamas and Hezbollah and Ansar Allah in Yemen, is a giant victory for the resistance.
What's poppin', my friends, my family? Welcome to a Nick at Night Live. RBN Live, welcome my friends, my family. That was a story I definitely had to make a hotspot video on. It's very unfortunate for Europe. but what's happening right now, you have a lot of these Zionists who's spooked, don't have the same reason to fight for occupied Palestine, don't have the same attachment to the land that we've seen with Palestinians. So what they're going to do instead, and this is what Ben Shapiro, he openly said that the only reason why he doesn't live in Israel is because he feel like he can help Israel out more being a propagandist in America. So now what these people are going to do is that they're going to flee to Europe to continue to corrupt their government even more, make them support Israel even more, to crack down on free speech even more. That's what my interpretation of it when I read this headline. I think there's a lot of cope that they use here. Many are concerned about Israelis leaving Israel, but might they be rejuvenating Jewish life in the diaspora? Wonder what they mean by that. And this is very interesting timing because over the last few decades, as you guys see with the headline here, Israel always had a net inflow, more Jewish people, booming tourism industry. Now, as I was playing the video, that video I just showed you guys, you have tourism that is essentially dead, which is one of the biggest industries. Now you have more people leaving the country that's coming in. You have escalating boycotts. BDS was big before. Now it's larger than it's ever been, especially on the international scene. You have, as I mentioned in that video as well, 60,000. This is stuff that none of the media covers. Like whenever you listen to these Zionist propagandists, they feel, or they present this aura of cockiness, and I guess they have some reason to celebrate, considering the strength that Israel still willed. But they don't discuss the massive toll on the economy like we see here. 60,000 Israeli businesses close in 2024 as war takes toll on the economy. So think about the situation that the Zionist state is in. And I have a great guest. I want to bring my guest, Daniel Dumbrill, in here. But think about the situation that Israel is in right now, where you have an entire generation that is going through a mental health crisis. Actually, I need to find a headline to show you guys. There's a ton of young people that is going through therapy because remember, Israel is a state that has mandatory military service. It is also a society that is very casualty averse as well. So you have a ton of IDF soldiers that's coming back from Gaza. There's many that came back in Lebanon in a body bag. Numbers that the IDF still refuses to release. But the IDF has taken heavy losses, which is why they accepted that fraudulent ceasefire in the first place, so they can regroup. Another victory of the resistance. So you have an entire generation that has been traumatized, been disabled, a lot of families that lost family members. Many young people now allowed to participate in the market because of the draft. And then a lot of the older Israelis that have money, that have a second passport, they're leaving too. Because fuck this shit and get too real for them. So your most reliable spending block is consumed with never-ending war, and then they coming back broken. Older Israelis are fleeing in mass, and you have Israel in Yemen with a massive blockade of the Red Sea. That's also harming Israeli businesses. I won't pretend that the resistance haven't taken a big toll in this as well. It's been devastating for the fighters in Yemen. Lebanon have been particularly devastated. The Palestinian people suffered unlike we never seen before. But do not let these Zionist propagandists ever convince you that it came without a cause, that the Zionist regime is a regime that will last forever. It is weaker than it's ever been, especially internationally. But what I want to bring my guests. I just want to cover that, do a little quick talk about it as well. Found this story very funny. I have an amazing guest joining us. Another journalist from China. You guys know we've been broadening our horizons here and speaking to many people in China that can debunk the nonsense Western narrative. They want us to hate China. I'm not going to hate China. We have Daniel Dumbrill join us, commentator from China. Also host of his own YouTube channel that does very well. Great to have you on RBN for the very first time, Daniel. Great to meet you.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Yeah, I've seen a bunch of your stuff, so it's good to be here.
Yeah, it's actually great to we follow each other. It's great to finally be in conversation with you. You saw my intro monologue. I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on the Israeli-Gaza conflict. I know you're in China.
Yeah.
And I'm a big Red Note enthusiast. It's one of the few ways that Americans can talk with our Chinese brothers and sisters. And one thing I noticed when I immediately went to Red Note is I noticed that I'm like just a filthy moderate in China. I'm considered a radical in the United States because everyone hates Zionism. Israelis were taking a lot of heat on Red Note. There's a lot of awareness being raised. So I want to get your perspective as someone who commentated in China. What is the view of people have in China regarding this Israeli regime? Your thoughts on their barbaric military action in Gaza and them invading their neighbors as well, Daniel. Thank you for joining RBN.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the Chinese people see the Palestinians. I mean, they don't live within the propaganda bubble that exists in the West that has kind of protected Israel for all these years. And I mean, even within that bubble, you would think it has already become obvious enough what Israel is and what they're really about. But China never even had that hurdle. They never had their own government and their own media protecting Israel like the West did. So it's just even more clear to everyone here about the truth of what's going on. I guess the other thing I'd add too, one thing I want to mention too is the Israelis who are leaving Israel. It's not only, I just want to add like a kind of a clarifying comment too, because even though most of them are probably going to be Zionists, and you're saying, good luck to the communities that are accepting them, because there's a certain attitude that comes with Zionism that's not very pleasant. But there's also people within Israeli society that are speaking out against it, and they're not very welcome in Israel anymore too. They're being shunned from their communities. It's not a good place to be an Israeli and to be speaking out against the occupation. That's a difficult thing to do. So I would imagine people like that would be leaving also. I just wanted to mention that because I know I've been speaking to one of my friends, Dan Cohen, quite a bit. And there's just a lot of other channels who have a very difficult time, or they don't separate enough that distinction. Zionists and even
they try and ban people like Dan Cohen from entering Israel. I don't know if you saw this. They're making a list of Jews that is no longer welcome in Israel.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. So you imagine if you were a Dan Cohen in Israel, you'd want to leave also. But ultimately, the people who are blurring the lines or not making that distinction, Israel's happy when you do that because they want everybody. They want to rope everybody in together. They want to represent what it is to be a Jew. And they want anti-Semitism to rise because it creates the basis and the foundation for this victim mentality that they're allowed to do anything. We've got the right to defend ourselves because look at the whole world. There's all this anti-Semitism we're dealing with. So I think it's really important sometimes to just mention those little things, saying there are some people who are leaving who are probably against the occupation also.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's why I would never fall for the trap of calling them the Jews. I call them Zionists. I label them as their ideology, and they hate when you do it. Because I would have a post critique in Zionism. They're like, Nick, just say the Jews. You hate the Jews, don't you? No, I have a lot of peace-loving Jewish friends like Max Blumenthal, Dan Cohen. These are people that we had on our show. We love their work. We had our Jewish brothers from Due Distance on as well. And I drive them crazy because I would never use the J word because I'm talking about the Zionists, the people who believe in this disgusting genocidal project of the Zionist entity. And I use the term Zionist because it doesn't even separate based on religion. There's Christian Zionists, which is the number one driver of Zionism in the West. And there's some people who get upset with me when I say this. I don't understand why. But there's a very powerful and influential Muslim Zionist political power in the Middle East that enables the state of Israel. Once again, that's one of the reasons why they want to take out Syria. That's one of the reasons why they take out Yemen. These are Arab countries who oppose the genocide in Gaza, who did anything they can to fight against Israel. Meanwhile, you have many of these Arab states that are enabling Israel. You have many who protected Israel as Iran retaliated. And that's why I always use that distinction of Zionists to highlight the people who are the genocidal apartheid advocates. Meanwhile, people like Jewish Voice for Peace, they're being victims of the quote-unquote anti-Semitism crackdown Donald Trump. But Daniel, I'll pass to you. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. They try to say that when you say Zionist, they're saying, you mean Jews, don't you? And when you really clarify, absolutely black and white saying, no, I'm talking about Zionists, then they just revert to, well, Zionists is basically Jews anyway, so you're still criticizing the Jews. They want you to get into that, but no, there definitely absolutely is a distinction, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another Zionist we've been calling out. I want to show you guys this. We uncovered this more with our friends Due Distance. I saw this because we are living in, and this is what I was worried about when I hear these stories of Zionists moving to Europe. They are unapologetic in their advocacy for authoritarian crackdown on freedom of speech. And the same people who enabled the anti-Semitism hoax, meaning essentially the Democratic Party, they're the one who enabled Trump fascism by accepting the premise that protesting the state of Israel is somehow anti-Semitic. So now you have Bernie Sanders and AOC. They're doing this fighting the oligarchy tour, and they're fighting the oligarchy by essentially promoting never-ending war, attacking Trump for fighting against Russia, and still being extremely weak because Bernie Sanders signed on a Lindsey Graham resolution to support Israel forever as they waged never-ending war against their neighbors. You have AOC who signed onto the resolution, that bullshit resolution conflating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism. And now at these, I can't describe it as nothing else other than Trump derangement syndrome rallies. You have Free Palestine protesters being arrested at a Bernie rally. Let me play this video.
One America in which the wealthiest people, the top 1%, have never, ever had it so good.
Let's see the Free Palestine flag down. And then once again, because Bernie Sanders has a history of this, Bernie Sanders allows anti-war, anti-genocide protesters to be arrested. Are they booing? This is the resistance, guys.
Who are they booing? Are they booing the arrest of them, or are they booing the Palestinian activists?
Either way, it's not a good look.
Yeah, it's not. It's not.
Because I did not realize what you're saying, that you could interpret it either way. I can see you can interpret it as a crowd booing the police, but it seems like they are upset that Bernie is being disrupted. That was my initial reading of it. But I acknowledge that I think you can read it both ways as well.
You never know. You never know. But these people like AOC and Bernie, like, there's no way that they don't understand that these people who are calling for the freedom of Palestinians are on the right side. And what is it that's holding them back? Is it that they know that they have no chances politically if they go, hand in hand with them? Is it because they're, being controlled? Like, because, I love that interview with AOC. Remember when she was talking about occupied Palestine, and then the reporter asked her to clarify, what do you mean by occupied Palestine? And she started stuttering. She turned red, and she's like, I'm not really a geopolitical expert. And there was something holding her back. She knew what she meant. She knew what was going on, but all of a sudden she's like, oh, you know what? It felt like she all of a sudden realized she crossed a red line. It's just bizarre.
You know what makes this even more infuriating? The reason why I want to make sure the working class in the United States never fall for this again is because Bernie Sanders doesn't even take AIPAC money. AOC doesn't even take AIPAC money. They are weak on Israel. You guys can see this here. You have Bernie Sanders during these rallies that is openly in the middle of a genocide. Imagine during the Holocaust, you have people saying Germany has the right to defend themselves as they are exterminating Jewish people. Do you understand how crazy that would sound? But this is Bernie Sanders during the Trump derangement syndrome rallies.
Israel has a right to defend itself against terrorism.
Who is this for?
What is that?
Like, who is that for? And then you have this, because during the Trump derangement syndrome rallies, I'm sparing you guys with the clips I've seen because it's horrifically cringe. They're talking about the authoritarianism of Donald Trump, because it is pretty fucking scary to see Trump cracking down on free speech the way he is. But you have AOC in the Democratic Party and Bernie Sanders who set the table for it, the same way that Democrats always do. Go ahead, Daniel.
The more pertinent discussion from an honest person would be how the criticisms of a genocide in Israel are being wrapped up into this discussion of anti-Semitism. If AOC hosts a discussion on anti-Semitism, she's accepting it basically as it is being presented in public. And the bigger issue right now is this word is being used to silence criticisms of a genocide and of Israel. And so right there, that is so disingenuous, because you first need to clarify what is real anti-Semitism, how is it being misused, and then you can go on to say, okay, yeah, let's fight anti-Semitism, because they're not wrong. You know what? I actually do think there is a legitimate rise in anti-Semitism because there is this blurring of the lines, and I think a lot of that is on Israel because they want to blur those lines. Like I said, between Zionism and Jews and all of this, like there are legitimately people that are saying, oh, well, bring up all of these old narratives and things like that. So it's a legitimate issue, but the bigger issue first is before you target this, you need to define it properly and pull back in the reins.
And what makes, to your point, what makes AOC and Bernie doing so disgusting is because they're using the Holocaust Memorial Museum definition of anti-Semitism that was promoted by the GOP. Because like you said, Daniel, we're going to talk about this issue. We got to be very specific in how we use it, because the Zionist lobby and the Mossad openly said they use anti-Semitism as a way to shield criticism of Israel. And I'm sorry I can't get a bigger frame of this picture, but this is what Black Agenda report. You guys know our friend Mark Kimberly. This is what they reported on. She voted for the Israeli lobby's bogus anti-Semitism definition. So to your point, Daniel, which I never seen people hate Jews. Like I'm not buying it, to be honest. I'm not buying it because I'm around the most radical of them. and obviously you can say the far right white supremacist people, they are legitimately anti-Semitic, but they hate everybody.
Yeah,
they hate everybody, and I think they're doing their job at they're useful idiots of the establishment. That's why, and you can count them. I'm not saying that people are wrong by counting them, but it's not like it's zero on the left. Like I don't accept the claim that there's any on the left. You know how many radical Palestinian activists I've been around? It's not like I'm around liberals. You know what I mean? I am around the people who support armed struggle, the people who are supportive of Hamas. I have never, ever seen any of them ever say fuck Jews or ever say anything that counteractive to hating the Jewish people. Even in the Hamas charter, the people literally engage in combat with Israel. The 2017 Hamas charter separates between Zionism and the criticism of Zionism and their love for the Jewish brothers and sisters. Many of them, like Dan Cohen, who they protected as well. But after seeing the Western societies crack down on free speech, which is non-existent in Germany and England, and now is being completely stripped away in the United States, I am at the position. I don't 100% disagree with you, but I am at the position where I'm not even planning. I'm cutting the head off the dragon. I'm not playing around with it. I'm not doing this thing where like, oh, technically there is some anti-Semitism on the left. No, there's not.
I don't think it's on the left, and it's not to the. There are some voices that are popping up online that I've seen Dan Cohen battling against, where it's like, I can't believe you even need to do this, and there are certain people who are doing that. But I think that the Zionists also understand that there isn't enough of it happening, especially on the left. Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly why you catch people and you see these stories of people painting swastikas on their own bakeries, and they turned out to be Jewish people doing it, or yelling out things in the crowd, and they turned out to be Jewish people doing it. Or I don't know if you remember many, many years ago, there were these bomb threats that were being called into synagogues, and they found out that it was an Israeli Jew doing it because they want that perception of an anti-Semitism problem. They need it to push this and to be able to do all the things that they're doing. So I think they essentially, the Zionists, agree with you. And that's why that they've got to go out and actually make it look like it's a bigger issue than it really is. I still think there is some benefit when I'm seeing Dan battling against this, battling against people with really large followings, saying that it's the Jews that are the problem, or look at what the Talmud says, this is what they follow. So I feel like I want to kind of stand in solidarity with him, especially with how much he's done for this cause. And that's a genuine problem that he's facing too. But generally speaking, it still needs to be made to look bigger than it really is by these people.
100%. I agree with you. This is the last thing I will share. Once again, I'm gonna break this down more with due distance because they have like another rally coming up. The Trump derangement rallies are so fucking cringe. This is a clip, and I mentioned before how the Bernie AOC crowd has essentially been replaced with MSNBC watching boomers. This is the person who they trying to push, and they really doing this again, guys. And this, I'm going very hard because the working class can't afford to spend another $400 billion on this failed project with people who are pro-war. AOC is pro-NATO. And if you want to give credit for Bernie for this, fine, but I don't. But Bernie do this thing where I support a resolution to end arms shipment to Israel. Biden and Trump already gave Israel all the weapons they needed to destroy Gaza. That's why they do that, by the way, because that's easy. You know it's not going to pass, and Israel already has the weapons in the first place. The fact that Bernie Sanders support resolutions to the fact that Israel can go after their neighbors, he supported his war with Israel's war against Hamas. Now, who is Hamas? Once again, when Bernie Sanders said Israel has the right to defend himself, who is Hamas? Hamas is a group of Palestinian orphans. I saw an insane number, around 70-80% of Hamas fighters are people who have parents who was killed by Israel, orphans. So Bernie pretends to support the Palestinian people, but the second that they resist, Bernie wants them dead.
Yep.
You guys realize that? All these people on the left, they support Israel eradicating Hamas. I don't.
They do lip service. They do lip service to. I think they recognize that they lost a lot of people their party lost a lot of people for not supporting the Palestinians, and they do lip service. But when it actually hits the fan, then they come out and like, okay, guys, you know what? No, we can't actually do this. We can't actually push it this far. I'm curious, what What accent did she do for liberals? I've seen her do her
let me play this.
I've seen her do her hood talk where she's like and all this. That's really entertaining. What was this? Was this like more like Taylor Swifty or?
Dude, it's literally you can't. I just played the clip. It's literally unbelievably cringe.
Donald Trump is a criminal who was found guilty of 34 felony counts of fraud. Liable for sexual abuse.
Like Biden.
Of course he's lying and abusing and manipulating the stock market too.
What are you doing?
When he talks about rapists and criminals, he should look in the mirror.
It's all like, you know, I've been living in China for 17 years now, and just like I look at this stuff, and it's all just like a game back and forth. Like, you know, they're all the same. It's like, you know, the Canadian elections are going on right now, you know, and I can vote from here if I wanted to. I'm like, what? Oh, it's the same thing. Like, what's the point? Like, what's the point? Like I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but it just goes back and forth. Now, obviously, there are a lot of big things changing, but I like Eric Lee. His quote was that more or less it's like in China, you can't change the parties, but you can change the policies. In the West, you can change the parties, but you can't change the policies. And you know, when it comes to Israel, that is like the epitome of that example of what he's talking about.
Yeah, and I know that these segments may seem obvious to us in the RBN community who is 100% post-duopoly, who sees through these people. But I cannot stress enough that during the last Bernie campaign, $400 million was spent by the working class funding these people instead of funding mutual aid, instead of funding and propping up a third party. So as they are doing this tour right now, it's upon us to inform the world. Even though I know these segments can be repetitive, we have to be here to inform the working class who these politicians and members of the bourgeoisie who meant to mislead them. And this here in a nutshell, this will be last down sharing. We get to China. You can see the hatred that AOC has for the enemies of the United States, how she enables U.S. imperialism, because this still lives free. This lives rent free in my mind. Anderson Cooper asked AOC, when people hear the word socialism, they think Soviet Union, Cuba, and Venezuela. Is that what you have in mind? She says, of course not. What we have in mind and what of my policy are more closely resemble what we see in the UK, Norway, Finland, and Sweden. So the position of the Social Democrats is that UK, a fully fucking damn near fascist state where there's no free speech, that's the model that they want to emulate. Not countries like China that lifted, because Bernie hates China. They hate China. Not the country that uplift poverty. Not the country like Cuba that has a massive expansion of life expectancy, literacy rates, and education despite massive sanctions. AOC and the left in the United States wants to turn us to the UK. That's their vision. Meanwhile, I end the segment there. Any final thoughts on the Social Democrats and what I would call the general fake resistance in the United States, which is Bernie, AOC. All these people have anti-China derangement, anti-Russian derangement, and I can't stand it. You know what I mean? They are bane to the peace movement with their nonsense. But then I'll give you last thought, then we dive right into China.
Yeah, I think it goes back to their red lines also. Like if I think Bernie Sanders once, there was a story of him going to Russia and praising their subways, how beautiful their subways looked, and then he got slammed for that. And it reminds me of, you know, like when LeBron James was also asked about the Hong Kong riots, and he just said something as simple as, I don't think we have all of the facts, which was an understatement of the year. He was right. He was the most correct person. And they just went crazy over him. They started drawing pictures of him looking like Mao Zedong. And then they started going through the NBA, excuse me, and asking everybody, what's their opinion? What's your opinion on China and Hong Kong? And it was almost like McCarthyism, like this witch hunt all over again. And so I think they also know that they can't even say, maybe there's some things we can learn from China. And that's a red line that they've got to say, no, I'm really against China.
Yeah. I want to.
Sorry, we have a sandstorm here. We have a sandstorm that came in from Mongolia all the way to Chongqing, like 2,000 kilometers away, whatever that is in miles.
Shit.
It's like all the way across China. And I got a cough while I was in Tokyo just over a week ago, and this is just making it worse. So if you see me,
it's all good.
It's like I got sandstorm cough.
All right, so let's shift away from domestic politics here in the United States. I want to ask you more about what's going on in China. You guys know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big red note enthusiast. And obviously when TikTok came back, there was a lot of Americans that flee back to TikTok. And I have no idea why anyone would do that. Like, red note is like 1,000 fucking times better than TikTok. I guess I don't get the kids. I'm out of touch. I will admit that I'm a fucking old ass out of touch motherfucker, I guess. But red note is where it's at, man. And I showed you guys a video last time during my intro on the last show. I'm going to show you guys this video because ever since this tariff war, we have seen Chinese social media users, that the ones that we can see. I can only imagine what they're doing on the Chinese version of TikTok, who names evades me, on their giant social media platforms. But you have people in China that is absolutely cooking Donald Trump and MAGA for the ridiculous anti-China policies, and JD Vance for calling them peasants. So this is only a 30-second video. Then I'll pass it to you, Daniel, because I want you to speak a lot more on this regarding the Chinese reaction to tariffs. Now you think that's going to go. But let's watch the video. I thought this was funny.
I don't want to criticize my own government. My government doing a fantastic job compared to your government. Imagine my government is my boyfriend. Your government is your boyfriend. My boyfriend is rich, being responsible, and do me good in bed. And your government, poor, steal your money, gaslighting you with fake democracy, fake freedom. Meanwhile, I'm here, and you're there. Oh, I just love the way he lied to me. Also, your boyfriend having golden shower with his master behind your back. Guess who his master?
You know, one thing I've noticed ever since I joined Red Note is that the Chinese they're fucking hilarious. And this is why they hate us communicating, because we're humanizing each other. I'm seeing so many like these content creators with a sense of humor. Let me put like they have a sense of humor, and we get to see
Tony from LC Science has been doing a lot in that category too. I don't know if you've seen him. The guy, he's this guy who does like accents, like he does like Southern accents, he does Donald Trump accents while he's selling.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I've seen him.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying the same thing. It's like, oh man, Chinese really have a sense of humor. I've been here for a long time, so obviously I know that. But this is an eye-opening moment for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's that's why there was already talks of getting rid of Red Note. I actually need to look into that. What came of that? But because I remember Tom Cotton and a lot of these fascist Republicans were saying, "Oh no, we got to get rid of Red Note first." This is why they hate the idea of Chinese people, Americans realizing that we have way more in common.
I had this discussion before too, where it's like, so much propaganda has been undone. Like the U.S. has literally poured in billions of dollars of anti-China propaganda money, funding. There was a few years ago, it was at 1 billion, 700 million a year. There was all these funds that were going into anti-China propaganda, and it was all undone. Now, if we say that eventually the U.S. does something really desperate and tries to bring the world into a war where China is involved in the conflict, there's a couple of different ways you can go about convincing your population that you need to fight the Chinese. One is obviously the Israeli way of demonizing the other side, like they call Palestinians human animals or whatever it is. Well, that's going to be more difficult now because so many Americans have had conversations directly with Chinese people on these platforms. They've become friends with them. And then the other, a more traditional American method, is we need to go over there and save these people. We need to save them from their own government. But they're realizing that Chinese people have a better life than a lot of people in America. Their public infrastructure, their high-speed rail, all this stuff. Everybody's like saying, why can't we have this kind of stuff? So that's out of the door too. So these two main tools of propaganda to convince you that you got to fight these people are gone. And if you imagine, during the buildup of the war in Iraq, if they had something similar, like an Iraqi social media platform, if social media would have been a thing back then, you had Americans talking to ordinary Iraqis. They were joining them in their kitchens and seeing what they cook, seeing their dances, seeing whatever it is. How much more difficult would it have been to get away with carpet bombing Iraqi cities? Like that would have been so much more difficult. And I'm not saying America's going to carpet bomb the U.S., but they need people to hate China. They need people not to ask, why can't we have the same things China has? What are you guys doing? It's made that job so much more difficult for them.
Yeah, and that I have been blessed with speaking to many people like Counterpoint China. We had Li Jingjing joining on Monday, Carl Zha. I studied a lot about China to try and just completely erase all the anti-China propaganda that I've been hit with my entire life. But I realized that and this has been the failure of the peace movement, is that they've failed to humanize the enemies of the United States empire. They will say stuff like, oh man, I think we should end war. I think we should promote peace. But fuck China. I think Vladimir Putin is a tyrant. Enabling and supporting the narrative of Washington, of the Pentagon, which saying that you oppose war, but I think Saddam is evil. I think Russia is evil. I think all these people are evil. That doesn't really mean anything. What you did, you legitimized their mission the second that you accept their framing about United States enemies. So I seeing, and I showed these before. Let me pull this up again. If I get this pull up, the ad block. Let me take the ad block off here. But this is the reason why I talk to people like you. The reason why I try to humanize China or Amy. Jesus Christ, people wonder why, and they wonder why no one fucking read their bullshit articles. Look at this website. Oh, Jesus Christ. Let me find another source. God damn it.
Okay. Yeah, well, while you're looking for that, I mean, it's almost like they had to do that to retain legitimacy, just like the Bernie Sanders and the Russian subway line kind of story, where they have to add this, okay, but, this is a terrible guy, but we shouldn't go to war. It's almost like if you didn't do that before, you would be ostracized from your community. You would be criticized. You would lose economic opportunities or whatever it is. And so you had to do that. And that was always the US's way of censorship, was molding people into a certain set of behaviors or a certain set of ideas. But now we're getting to a point where people are getting out of line a little bit too much. And that's exactly why you have these things like saying, okay, we got to ban TikTok. We're losing control of the narrative. We got to kick out students who are on student visas who support Palestine, even though we're the land of the free. And this was the exact item of distinction that we used to sell our country on, saying that this is why we're better than everybody else, because you're free to express your opinions here. So now when their soft mechanisms don't work anymore, they've got to move to hard mechanisms. So there always was control. There never was real freedom as long as enough people believed the right thing. And now that mask is falling. Yeah.
This is what I'll try to pull. I'll just find another source. And I want you to I want your comment on this, because this is the result of decades of pro-war propaganda hammering both the liberal class and the conservative side. I had a viral tweet where I was explaining how China is not my enemy, and the amount of white dudes in my comments melting down was hysterical to me. Look, Americans remain critical of China. Many see China as increasingly influential. How dare they be influential, Daniel? How evil of them. Growing their economy, how dare they? And considering limiting its power a top priority. And here's another one I just found real quick. Americans feel more threat from China. White dude in Tennessee. He's scared of China. Not the corporations that's screwing him. Not the violent police state that murders Americans with impunity. The white dude living in rural Tennessee is fucking scared of China. They said like 68% view China as a threat. Here it is. Record level 58% of Americans view China development as a war power, as a critical threat to the interests of the United States. I'll show you this now. You can speak on it, because this is the voucher. I commented on the show before, but you guys see the rabid hatred.
Oh yeah,
that is installed because there have been all these Americans, after China is embarrassing the United States on the global stage, they've been fantasizing about murdering 350 million Chinese.
it's bizarre. It's bizarre. I mean, like a mask off moment for a lot of these people who, up until this point, when they held dominance, and there was nobody challenging their dominance, pretended really well to be the good guys and to pretend that they were deserving of that position, if they are somebody who supports, America and their superpower status and the unipolar nature of the world. At that point, they were comfortable. They could pretend to be somebody they weren't. They could pretend that we deserve this. And then as soon as it gets anywhere close to looking like that we're going to be moving into a multipolar world and power would be shared, then they're like, all right, now, you know what? If we have to genocide 350 million people to stop that from happening, we should really consider that. I don't know if this guy is joking or not, but there's a lot of people who are posting this, and even as a joke, it's just disturbing. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if somebody was joking about doing, multiple 9/11s or something like that, people would understand what is wrong with that. People in the West would be like,
even if they're joking, it shows that they're primed for war, because you see how little the Chinese life means to them, and they're under this impression that action that needs to be taken. And I want to ask you about this, because this is one of the reasons why we are seeing this hatred, because as Americans see the accomplishment of China, there is this great envy. Like, once again, I legitimately, I talk about this all the time, I legitimately listened to what the right wing criticism of China. I'm like, what the fuck? Why do you guys hate them so much? And they essentially just bring up Chinese success. That's all they mention. They're like, China is making moves, making trading partners in Africa, and that's why they're a threat. So they're expanding, and that's why we're supposed to hate them. But anyway, I want to ask you about this. I want to ask you about the tariffs. Yeah. Because I've been trying to learn and get as many perspectives on the show about what could potentially happen as well. It seems like a very misguided policy from Trump, but this seems to fire it up and rejuvenated the Chinese people, because they see themselves under attack by the United States. And Xi seems like he's been prepared for this for a long time, especially after the first Trump administration. And now, because of Trump's erratic actions, you have countries that are looking to China for the first time, including the EU. You have China that's doing a tour through Southeast Asia, including Vietnam and Malaysia. So can you speak more on that and the moves that China is making to circumvent these tariffs and other options they may have?
Yeah, I mean, it's another example of so much propaganda being undone. Previously, America, even in Trump's last administration, spent time going around the world trying to convince everybody not to deal with companies like Huawei. And actually, that was one of the rare times that Pompeo even threatened Israel. Said, no, you can't use Huawei 5G networks, otherwise, you may lose some of our support, which was like one of the most wild things ever. But that's how much effort and how far they were willing to go to stop people from working with China. Now they've incentivized the entire world to work with China and to find alternative options. Domestically, I'm in the craft beer industry. I have a craft beer brewery in Shenzhen, and I've been speaking to other people in the same industry. And we rely on a lot of American hops. America grows some really great varieties of hops, but they're going to become really expensive now. So everybody is readjusting their core beers, their main beers, to use New Zealand hops. And hops from New Zealand are really good also. They're quite good. And we're diversifying. I would imagine there's other industries. The gym I go to, a lot of the people, they like Optimum Nutrition and Muscle Tech and some of these American brands of protein powders and things like that. Well, they're switching to domestic ones, and there are some great domestic ones, but they just never made that switch because they were just always comfortable with this is the brand that they always bought. If the tariff war ends, and I mentioned this on my Twitter, these people aren't going to go back. If our core beers were changed and customers like it, why try to risk changing it again? If these people have became comfortable with their local protein powder, and obviously these are just two small examples, but you can imagine this happening all over China. And the thing is that alternatives do exist. Whereas in the other direction, where is America going to get this stuff manufactured? How are they going to bring online, factories to build all the stuff that they're buying from China? It's just not going to happen. And I said that before Trump receded on the tariffs against computers and chips and some technology related items because he realized how they'd be just screwing themselves over. And so exactly that. There are no alternatives for that. So if all of a sudden the trade war ends, there would have been irreparable damage done to America and American brands, not only in China, but probably all around the world, with people who have already found alternatives and who had already moved on. It's a weird thing. I mean, you know, when they really pressured Huawei also, they banned their phones from being able to use the Android OS. They try to stop them from being able to buy chips. It pushed China to innovate. They weren't ready for that at that point. At that point, they were like, okay, we really got to put a lot more money into chip manufacturing, and they're making amazing strides right now. I don't think they're there yet, but they've pushed them to put a lot more attention on this. And this is exactly what this is going to do also. It is going to supercharge China. There will be short-term pain, of course, but there's going to be long-term gain for China. And the funny thing is I was talking to some people who are involved in politics in Beijing as I can't remember what they do. They do consulting work or reports. And I asked them who they wanted to win, Biden or Trump. And they said Trump, 100%. They said, we know that he will bring short-term pain, but at the result of long-term gain for China. And that's exactly how it's unfolding.
I've heard many people who are advocates of multipolarity say they prefer Donald Trump simply because he will help accelerate it with his ridiculous policies. And he did what I thought was, and I'm still shocked by this, like, because Ursula von der Leyen, the Nazi herself, even she was like, oh man, I think China looking pretty good right now.
Yeah.
I'm like, bro, I literally did not see that coming. Like, I didn't realize Trump would be that unhinged. Will he bring the EU fascists on board too? Like, oh man, the United States lost their mind. This is from our friend Bernard Bertrand, who highlighted how even EU officials, and this is like the fifth one that said the transatlantic alliance is over.
Yeah,
what a gigantic blunder.
Arnaud is great. Well, my family has gone on vacation with his family a couple times. We're quite close, but this is something that I would have never predicted. Also, I thought that Trump would have brought down America and Europe together. I never saw this one coming either.
So Trump had this delusional plan where he was going to separate Russia and China. Now I'm getting fucked up with these ad blocks today. But he had this absurd strategy he got from Vivek Ramaswamy, and I'm sure probably a few other right-wing think tankers, where they said we need to get essentially this headline just said G set to host EU leaders in July. So G going to have a big meeting with EU leaders in July because of the boneheaded decisions of Trump. But they thought he was going to separate Russia from China, and they got China closer to the EU. Russia and China still closer together. MAGA 5D chess. And as they are waging a trade war against China, as they are convincing their followers to hate China, this is what the American ruling class is doing. They're promoting never-ending war, never-ending genocide, while allowing our infrastructure to continue to deteriorate. Because one of the things I've done, I got a lot of people in my family interested in China now, because I will explain to them what high-speed rail is. And in the United States and in MAGA, their plan to make America great again is to cancel the plan to develop high-speed rail in Texas. And so I'll read this headline here. U.S. Department of Transportation canceled $63 million grant to Amtrak for Texas high-speed rail. So we're canceling, and the MAGA vision for making America great again is allowing our infrastructure to crumble and become outdated compared to China, so we can have tax breaks for the rich, so we can send more money to Israel. Yeah. So isn't that interesting? I want you to speak more, because this is what I always try to emphasize to Americans, how much our ruling class screwed us over. Because as our ruling class was spending trillions of dollars in Afghanistan, during that same period of time, China was creating futuristic architecture, having high-speed rail over the country. So can you speak more on the Chinese project, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, even in America, there was that story of previously car companies buying up streetcar companies, streetcar rails and things like that, and then digging up the rails and paving over them just so that they could improve the auto industry. And I think that's what happens with kind of unfettered capitalism, where it's just anything goes as long as you pay to play. Whereas in China, they look at it and say, what is going to be the greater good for the people? We're going to build this high-speed rail right now. It might not be profitable at first. It might take a while, but this is the right direction to go. And I guess that's the benefit of this system too, is that they can put out a 20-year, 30-year, 40-year plan, and it's not going to change 4 years later when somebody says, "No, that was terrible. That was a terrible idea." Just like with the high-speed rail that's been canceled there. So it's just continual improvement. When I first arrived in China in 2008, I think we had like 2 subway lines in Shenzhen, the city I was in at that time. And now I think it's about 250 kilometers, whatever that is, 180 miles of subway line. There was one high-speed rail that went from Shenzhen to Guangzhou, which is, I don't know what that is, like 100 kilometers max, somewhere around there. And now there's 30,000 kilometers of high-speed rail all around the country. I wouldn't be able to imagine this anywhere else. I remember when I lived in Toronto, we had this one new line, the Shepherd line. It took us, I think it was between 7 and 12 years to build like 2 new stations on a new line. So the money that's going into infrastructure and the planning and the consistency is just out of this world here. I don't know how you would fix that in a system that exists like the U.S.'s system, because I would never advocate for the U.S. to copy China's system, but at bare minimum, there must be things that America could learn from China, and that's a no-go zone for a lot of people. Like I said before, as soon as you say that, you're going to be attacked, or that's a no-go zone. So I don't know how you're going to fix this issue, but things have been moving forward here at lightning speed.
That the point you just made at the end there, that's why it's so weird that Americans have this fear of China, because China is not even trying to turn the world socialist. Like Xi and the Chinese government, they made it clear they don't care if you're a capitalist, they want to do business with anyone. It's America in the West that actively influences and interferes in other countries in order for that country to implement the desired central planning model. That was the Cold War. We're still doing this to this day, engaging in regime change, operations, sanctions regime that meant to topple socialist leaders. So the American empire, its focus is to impose its ideology on the world. Meanwhile, China's like, man, can we sell you guys shit?
Yeah,
which
that's
one
it.
is a bigger threat?
That's it. Even the leader of Argentina, before he got into office, he was saying, we're not going to deal with dirty commies anymore. And he was like really criticizing China. And then a few months after he was in, he's like, man, we need to work with China more. They just buy our stuff. And they don't ask for anything else. They just buy our stuff. I mean, they don't care. Meanwhile, you like you said, the U.S. Needs governments to capitulate to their economic models and systems of governance, probably for a couple of reasons. One, so that those countries are completely open for exploitation by Western multinational corporations, and also so that there isn't an example like there is in China of somebody else doing it better. I was a good friend of mine who teaches at Sun Yat-sen University, a guy named Ali from Lebanon. He was talking about when the Soviet Union was around, workers' rights and just the general condition of workers in the U.S. was far better. And as soon as the Soviet Union fell, it went down really quickly because they no longer had an example of what was happening elsewhere in terms of workers' rights. What were workers getting somewhere else? It doesn't mean that the Soviet system was perfect. And again, like the U.S. would need to copy it, but at least there was an example of workers being treated better in many metrics. So you can't have countries winning like China is. And that's probably why so much money goes into propaganda, and where some guy in the middle of Tennessee or wherever he was is worried about China instead of all of the other immediate things that are impacting his life on a day-to-day basis.
I love how you bring that up. I really wish I could remember where I read this from. I really wish I can credit them. But I read and someone explained. I forgot if I read it or if I heard it in a lecture. It was such a long time ago. they explain how a lot of the reforms, a lot of the wins that labor achieved in the United States, just like you mentioned, the capitalist class in the United States only allowed that because there was in Cold War competition against the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union was boasting about all the accomplishments and achievement and quality of life improvement for the workers. So as the United States was engaging in this propaganda campaign globally against the Soviet Union, they had to show them something. That's when you seen the New Deal. That's when you see all these socially progressive worker policies that the United States used to champion for the white people, but they champion it so they can have a middle class they can point to. Then the second that the Soviet Union dismantled, like, oh, we don't have no reason to spread lies that we are taking care of our workers. So that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. This will be the last segment we do. We'll wrap up here soon. Here's a short clip, and it's going to be hard to get through. This is one of our propaganda reports. I want to show you guys the insane cope propaganda that spread that is infesting the minds of boomers all across this country, which is why we see these crazy polls. Segments like these is why you see people fantasizing about murdering hundreds of millions of Chinese. So this is only a 3-minute clip. I'm going to let a lot of it play because I want to pass it to you so you can debunk this. Here's a China hawk talking to one of the, I don't know this fucking guy's name. I'm blanking on the host names, but he's one of the most unhinged, pro-war neocons you can possibly find on TV. Like, it doesn't get worse than him. He's a 10 out of 10 when it comes to a neocon. So this is a conversation between two China hawks. This is the conversation that is being had among Republicans, Democrats, white America as a whole. This rabid hatred of China, this strategizing. How can we take down the Chinese? So I'm gonna let it play. Feel free if you want to chime in and you want to interrupt. Feel free because it's gonna be hard to get through. I'm gonna try to let it play as much as I can because there's gonna be a lot to say on this.
China expert Stephen Moser joins us now. Stephen, welcome back to the program. It's good to see you again. Obvious first question: can China be trusted?
Be afraid of China. Can China be trusted? This is the programming, guys.
Well, thanks for introducing me earlier as a China hawk, because I've been a China hawk for a long time. As you know, we've done this show many times. And in the beginning, around 2000, I was a hawk in a flock of doves. And all the doves, however, in the past 25 years have gone to China, invited to banquets by Chinese party officials where they failed to realize when they were being wined and dined that they were the main course. And I think people now, Americans at large, and even most investors have realized how overdependent we've become on China, and how you made perfectly clear through the various interviews we just saw how China has repeatedly cheated on trade. I mean, going back to the World Trade Organization, they promised to protect intellectual property. They promised to open their domestic market.
You guys see the weak excuses? China promised to protect intellectual property. China stole our intellectual property. They say as China completely destroys the United States in technology. How is China stealing United States intellectual property when Chinese craftsmanship, their cars, their technology is better?
Yeah, the drones, that's exactly why they were rushing to block Huawei's 5G also, because their 5G was outperforming Qualcomm's metrics and all these other traditional companies. It's like, they're stealing a technology from the U.S. that doesn't even exist. There's another point too that where somebody made a point in the chat. Fei Liu, she said that actually when it comes to services, it's the opposite way. That Chinese companies use more in service dollars, service-related items from the U.S. than the other way around. I don't know that personally, but I've heard that a couple of times. So that's an interesting point. I think that one of the diplomats from Singapore in an interview mentioned that also, saying actually when you take the whole thing into account, it's not as imbalanced as people are saying. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, imagine you was accused of cheating on a test. Let's say you're a college student. Imagine you was accused of cheating on a test you got an A on, but the person you was accused of cheating on had a fucking D. The motherfucker failed the test. He had a D at best, and they're like, "You copied off this person." People like, how can you accuse me of copying off this motherfucker who had a lower grade than me? You guys understand that's how ridiculous this intellectual property argument is?
Yeah. Chris also mentions, which is true. Also, Apple exists in China. And that's right. Apple does really well. They've got lots of stores in China. Obviously, Tesla has made big inroads in China also, building factories here. I mean, people are doing it. It's available. It's but nobody's been kind of taking that opportunity.
Yeah. Great comments, Chris. Sorry I couldn't really look at the comments like this stream. I'm gonna make sure I get some super chats as we wrap up. I'm not gonna watch too much longer. Let's play the last clip and then we can begin.
No
We're almost an hour in. I'll watch one more little clip, quick clip.
Cheated on trade. I mean, going back to the World Trade Organization, they promised to protect intellectual property. They promised to open their domestic markets. Really, very little of that happened. All the problems when they occurred were papered over with promises, verbal promises, and paper promises that weren't worth the paper they were written on. And we finally have now an administration that is taking the threat from China seriously, because underlying all of the deceptions and the deceit we've seen from the Chinese Communist Party is this fundamental fact that China wants to dominate the 21st century. And it will do anything and everything it can to make sure that that happens. So we have to view every transaction with China through that light from a national security lens. And I realize this is a painful period for a lot of people. It's going to be very, very painful for the people in China too, Stuart, who have been the first and foremost victims of the Chinese Communist Party.
Stephen, we've raised tariffs on China. They've raised tariffs on us. China has restricted rare earths exports. They've halted deliveries of Boeing jets. Are we at the point where this tariff fight is out of control?
Well, I don't think you can ever say that it's out of control. I think that China has now played almost all of the cards that it's going to be able to play. What is it going to be able to do now? Is it going to shut down iPhone production lines in China? Is it going to shut down Elon Musk's products that he makes in China, sells in China, and sells to the rest of the world, but not the United States? I don't think so. Those are major projects that underpin the Chinese economy. And what's going to happen now, what's happening right now on the local level, and, you know, I spent years in China talking to ordinary people. I know the small businessmen in China, the guys that run the small and medium-sized factories. They have shut down. Those factories are done. Those millions of employees are going home, except they can't go home because their parents came from the villages 40 years ago to work in the factories. They were raised by their grandparents 20 years ago. Those villages are now shutting down. They're old. The elderly in the villages are old and dying. There's no soft rice paddy for them to land on again. China will have a huge population of unemployed, displaced workers in the years to come. And I think China is going to be absorbed with its internal problems and be forced to deal with those first. And they're going to back off on the tariff war.
China's internal problems.
Hold all the big cards, and we are going to win. 30 seconds, last to you.
I do, absolutely. 1/3 of the consumer product.
You guys say we're gonna win, and I'm asking to you guys. I want to get your thoughts, but you guys see how one of the reasons why he wanted us to be upset at China, because he said China has this plan to dominate the 21st century.
That's like
so run a successful country. We're supposed to hate them because they're rising as a global superpower. But Danny, I know you want to chime in. Please get your final thoughts.
I mean that's a good point. There is no evidence of China wanting to dominate the world. The way that it happens, the way that America dominates the world, and the way that China has quote unquote started to dominate the world in their view are two very different things. One, the US did it forcefully. You capitulate to their demands, or they overthrow your governments, they foment riots in your country, just like they did in my mother's country of Guyana in South America. And countless other places, especially in the in South America and Central America. That is called domination. That is called a desire to dominate. What they're talking about with China is they're becoming more dominant in terms of more people dealing with them just because they're doing it better. They're making products that people want. They're coming up with partnerships that people want to join. They're, you know, when they're in Africa, they're leaving productive assets on the ground. It's not that Chinese business people don't want to go out and make money, but, you know, of course that's their goal also, but they're leaving productive assets on the ground. They're developing win-win relationships. And so it's no wonder that more and more people want to work with them. So if that is the form of achieving dominance, that should be encouraged. America should be saying, well, why is it that they're dominating while they're not building military bases all around the world like us and crushing governments and countries when they don't capitulate? What is it that is better about their way that they're able to do it in such a soft way without having to actually kill people? I mean, this whole premise of wanting dominance, and actually just naturally achieving it. It needs to be something that's examined. And then he just goes on and says things like, with Apple and Tesla, they are projects that underpin the Chinese economy. What does that even mean? You gotta be kidding me. There are so many amazing electric car brands in China. I mean, I'm sure people have seen them pop up on YouTube, where people are just blown away by the quality and features that are coming out of Chinese manufacturers. And some of the most wealthiest people here, even in this city, even in Shenzhen, who are living in really good apartments, if you go into those apartment buildings, they're filled with Chinese electric vehicles, like from Li Auto and all of these other Chinese companies. There are quite a few people who are buying Teslas also. I think Tesla's doing pretty well, but by no means is Apple and Tesla underpinning the Chinese economy. That is the most ridiculous statement ever. And you can see that he's just stretching at anything possible to paint this picture.
Yeah, very well said, Danny. It was great to have you on. It's great to chat with you for the first time. Do you mind taking this chat on real quick? I want to get you out here, but do you have a quick answer to the super chat, John?
I don't know. I know that a lot of these countries are looking at exploring relations with China more and more now because of what's going on. There was a really interesting story of people in Vietnam actually cheering on China's response to the tariffs. And I saw other commentaries online that saying that, well, that really shows it when they're bringing Vietnam and China together. So I think, obviously historically there have been some tensions there, but with what's unfolding, it's bringing them closer and closer together. China has been far closer with countries like Cambodia and all of these other ones, but I think this is a turning point for the relationship with China and Vietnam, just like it is with China and Europe and many other countries because of what's going on. Exactly what I was talking about earlier in the conversation. There's going to be short-term pain, but for a long-term gain for a country like China.
Yeah, well said. I appreciate your expertise and you joined us on RBN. I think we were streaming this on your channel as well. Do you want to promote your channel? Will you have any work coming out? Any last things you want to shout out for our audience if they want to follow your work? I appreciate you coming on. It was a great conversation.
There was somebody who asked, "Is there a Pizza Hut in China?" Yes, there's a Pizza Hut in China. They got pizza. They got Pizza Hut, KFC, McDonald's. They got all of that. I mean, these brands are welcome to come in. So this idea that they're restricted somehow is just absolute garbage. It's more, animosity towards China doing things better, and also China bringing up a lot of their own brands also. But yeah, I don't see anything else there. But I have a feeling that a lot of your audience already kind of sees through a lot of the BS when it comes to China. Yeah, I mean, hopefully some of the stuff we discussed was still helpful nonetheless.
Yeah, like you guys would be surprised, man. There's a reason why we got hammered this shit over and over again. There was someone, and I think some people saw on Twitter because this guy commented on my timeline. He has MAGA in his name. He literally said that watching our show, he changed his opinion on China. I mean, these are. I know it may seem obvious to us, but you never know who's watching for the first time, man. You never know who someone who got bad information who's scrolling on. And I see it all the time. People who had their opinion changed. So I'm blessed to have a platform to be able to do that. So make sure you guys check out Daniel and his channel. I appreciate you guys for joining. Tomorrow we got a post duopoly show with This in Harlan's Media. That should be a fun one. So thank you guys for watching. Have a great rest of your night.